Hi everyone, Gareth here. Just to let you know that if you would like to support the production of the Music Room podcast, you can. Just head to musicroompodcast.uk/support or click the link in the show notes. Okay, on with the show. Hi, I'm Gareth, a composer for TV and an audio producer for podcasts like this. Like many others, I was lucky enough to have a positive music education. I'm extremely grateful that all that support led me to what I do today. For me, the music room was that place growing up where all the musos gathered like moths to a flame, a place to be with other creative-minded people. So let's go back there and spend some time in gratitude for all the people who've helped us get started. Welcome to the music room. This week in the music room.
I ended up doing a degree in maths. Indian classical music is based on the foundation of cross rhythms and, you have to learn to speak a rhythm before you play it. That's the kind of the Indian notation, Indian classical music notation.
Hello and welcome to The Music Room, the show where I chat with composers, songwriters and musicians and look back in time to their musical beginnings. If you haven't yet heard the first couple of episodes, I've already been blessed with fascinating tales from guests Kevin Sargent and Daisy Cool. So if you'd like to know their roots into music, take a browse at musicroompodcast.uk and have a listen. In this episode, I'm going to be chatting with when I say award-winning, I mean most of the awards. The award-winning composer Nainita Desai, whose emotive soundtracks to some of the most powerful documentaries in recent years have garnered attention from the music industry, and deservedly so. And if you hang around, later on, Nainita will be leaving an item and a piece of advice in the music room just for you. Yes, you at the back. Don't fall asleep. It's been a long week. There are a couple of items in the music room already. We have a tape recorder, very handy little machine, and Charlie Parker's Omnibook, a lovely bit of history to help understand the amazing jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker's playing. Okay, next up, music stories. This is the section of the show where I read out your musical stories and memories and a chance for you to thank the people and groups who inspired you to become a composer or a songwriter or a musician. I'd love to know your story, so if you'd like to share it, if it's in text form, email to hello@thesoundboutique.com, and if you'd like to send a voice note in, and let's face it, if you're a composer, songwriter or musician, it's going to be recorded in pretty high quality, I'd say. So use the link in the show notes. I'm not sure my email provider will thank me otherwise. So here we go. Here's a little shout out from Tim White. Hi Tim. My trumpet teacher was one of the most encouraging tutors anyone could ever want. My GCSE music teacher was also very supportive. My experience of music school was somewhat different, but still a great experience with the extra discipline instilling a great work ethic. Ooh, that's good to hear, Tim. Richard Wilkinson. Hello, Richard. I went to a pretty standard comp in Rochdale, but the school and Rochdale Music Service punched well above its weight in music teaching provision and quality. Teachers were great. There were 2 competition-winning brass bands. Wow. Huge influence and social opportunity for me early on. That's great, Richard. Josh Bonney. Hi, Josh. Started off at primary school in the school band where the leader, Mr. Beavis, taught me everything I know, and it kind of grew from there. Took GCSE where the teachers were so encouraging and definitely pushed me to perform live. BTEC at college inspired me to write my own music and took my degree in music then. Now on my MA course in composition, go Josh, for film, TV and game, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to put my work to real-world adverts and TV shows. Keep that excitement, Josh, and good luck. It never really goes away, does it, that sense of wonder? Amy Balcom. Hi, Amy. My secondary school teacher nearly got the sack for bullying me throughout my GCSE and A-levels. Wrecked my grades from an A to a D, didn't get to uni, was told I'd never teach, never get my piano grade 8 or compose professionally. That's awful, isn't it? Just shows what she knew with 30 piano students, a distinction for grade 8 piano, and a flourishing composing career. And she got the sack for bullying 3 years ago. Well, I think, Amy, that's karma at work, isn't it? Being creative is difficult enough to navigate without some numpty trying to mess it up. I'm very glad it didn't put you off. Amy goes on, my mentor in recent years has been not only an incredible inspiration and kick up the behind, but a wonderful friend, and I consider myself hugely lucky that they took me under their wing. It's so simple, isn't it? Be supportive, be open, be encouraging, and lift people up. And don't be a numpty like Amy's teacher. Here ends the lesson. Thank you to Tim, Richard, Josh and Amy. Your links will go in this episode's show notes and in the next Sound Boutique newsletter. Today's Music Room guest is a TV and film composer who Film 4 labelled one of the top 5 composers who should be on your radar. She's a World Soundtrack Awards winner, nominated for the British Independent Film Awards, RTS winner, Ivor Novello nominee, a BAFTA Breakthrough Brit and the IFMCA Breakthrough Composer of 2020. There's so much more in the way of awards and nominations, and as of this recording, the list is just growing. But needless to say, the music of Nainita Desai is somewhat celebrated. Let's find out what Nainita is up to now, and let her take us back in time to find out how it all began for her. And don't forget to stick around for the item and piece of advice that Nainita will be leaving in the music room. Nainita Desai, welcome to the music room.
Hello, Gareth. Lovely to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. So, Nainita, rarely a week goes by that I don't see that you've been nominated for something or won an award for something. And to be recognised by your industry must feel wonderful. But surely when Mark Kermode starts mentioning your name, that's got to feel even better, hasn't it?
Oh, that's, yes, lovely, Mark. I'm just so grateful that I'm on his radar, really. And it's, awards, it's all smoke and mirrors, Gareth. It's just a lot of hard work, as you know, and we all, as composers, we all work incredibly hard. And up until about 3-4 years ago in my aged long career, I've never been nominated for anything, let alone won an award. Awards were never ever on my radar, and then I discovered, oh, you're meant to enter. Okay. And so I think it was the first award I ever got nominated for and then actually won was a film that I scored about 5 or 6 years ago called The Confessions of Thomas Quick, and it was my first big feature documentary, sort of a film that actually got into the cinema, which was the biggest reward for me. That's my reward, is to have a project that people are aware of that actually watch.
What was that like then, sitting down in a cinema for the first time and hearing your music on the big screen? What did that feel like? Well,
I'm a person who tends to look forward as opposed to backwards, and so this is really interesting, doing this interview is very sort of forces me to be a little bit reflective, which is lovely. And it's the most wonderful feeling, really, to sit in a room. It's sort of also cringy because it's like when you're composing music and you're on your own and you're isolated in your studio, and that's great. And then you have an audience, and so I'm presenting my music for the first time to a client, for example. If I have to go for score review sessions and spotting sessions with teams like editors and directors, and that's as good as having a cinema audience, listening to your work. And so I'll go for a meeting and they'll listen to my music, and I'm sitting there, with my head in my hands, almost thinking, oh, I wish I'd improved on that piano part, or the MIDI controlling of that rhythm beat, and so it makes you feel very vulnerable.
That's the word, isn't it? It
yes.
exposes everything.
Yes. And so when I'm sitting in a cinema and all I can think of was, oh, they've kept the music so low in the mix. And I think that must be the catchphrase of every composer when they're listening back to their work on TV or on film. Think, oh God, why did I bother? The music is so low in the dub, in the mix.
We are at the mercy of the dubbing editors. If there are any listening, be kind to the music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But speaking of the music, your music has been featured in so many documentaries and are connected, I feel, by a level of emotion. They're all incredibly emotive. Do you lean into that emotion when you're writing, or do you have to check your emotions at the door sometimes so you're not in bits every day?
No, it is very difficult. And a lot of the films I've worked on cover very dark subjects. So when I'm in my studio, I'm actually in a very dark frame of mind, when I'm composing, which is all the time, all day
Oh,
and
crikey.
night. So when I get out of the studio, I'm in a much happier place, and I try to keep a delineation between the creative headspace, when I'm in my studio and I'm totally immersed. I mean, being truly immersed in the subject and the characters is very important for me. And of course, if it's a documentary and it's a true life story and a narrative, then I research and I dive into the subject matter in order to be able to. That's my way into a project, in order to be able to find some kind of authenticity and integrity to the story and the characters. So yeah, it is very difficult, and that's my way in. I kind of dive in and I inhabit the world of the film or the subject matter. When I scored The Reason I Jump, I read a lot of scientific papers on autism and how it's perceived with the different senses, and the same thing with For Sama, for example, about the Syrian civil war, the revolution. And I really got into the headspace, and that was very difficult emotionally. It's really tough, but I have to do that in order to be able to create a piece of music that when I compose, you're imparting a little bit of your soul into a piece of music. And if you don't do that, if you say, oh, I'll get this cue done in a couple of hours and I'll work very fast because I'm on a deadline and I need to get it done. When I send it off to the director, or they're listening to the music and they come back and they comment on it and they think, Nainita, there's something about this that's not quite working. I don't know what it is, but it's just not resonating. I go, damn, I should have spent an extra couple of hours on it. And I could tell that I've sent off a cue in a rush. And so I don't do that. I have to be 100% happy with whatever I send out, so that when they do comment on it, at least I know with my hand on my heart that I've done justice to the scene or the score or whatever it is I'm doing. So when I get feedback from a director, I have to be able to justify every single note that I have poured into that cue.
And you mentioned The Reason I Jumped there. Obviously, you did that very effectively with that because Mark Kermode was saying it portrayed what couldn't be said in words, which I thought was really interesting perspective on it.
For me, a score is the hidden character in a film, and it's telling the audience what cannot be explained in words.
Yeah. Wonderful. So you mentioned before we started recording, you have lots going on at the moment. Anything you can talk about?
I've finished a video game, actually, that's coming out this summer at some point. I'm not sure when. That's the kind of the sequel, I guess, to Telling Lies, which is a really interesting narrative game I scored a few years ago. It's the same developer, and it's all filmed. There's no CGI animation or graphics. It's totally filmed on camera with real actors. And then, but it's totally non-linear, and you will be able to play it on various platforms. So that's exciting. In terms of film and TV, I've got a lot going on. I'm working on a couple of drama series at the moment, one for Sky and one for BBC. Very, very different genres. One's a crime thriller and one is a period comedy drama, which is very so not what I am known for.
I was going to say, you don't have to go down that rabbit hole and into the dark place.
No, I like it. It's a very fun project. It's sort of guitar band based kind of thing.
Great.
So that's fun. And then I've got a few feature documentaries I'm scoring, which are very, very different subjects, very different musical genres. I mean, for example, 14 Peaks was epic and symphonic, and I'm scoring a few others at the moment, which are very, very different. So musically, so I like working on different genres because it keeps me on my toes creatively, and also there's no crossover, so I can't accidentally send the wrong piece of the music to the wrong director. I've done that a couple of times.
Oh, can you imagine? So, Nainita, this sounds a little bit kind of period drama comedy to me.
Yeah, I've done that once. I thought, oh my God, I've sent the wrong music to the wrong director, sending them all off at the same time.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so that's what you've got going on at the moment. if you're ready, shall we go back in time?
Yeah.
Here we go. When were you first aware of a connection with music, do you think?
Oh, well, let me think now. Funny enough, my mother sent me a picture of myself when I was 2 years old, holding a vinyl single in my hands.
Oh,
I used to scream for it to the same Bollywood track to be played again and again. But my earliest musical memories, I think, were about, well, my parents bought this beautiful Bang& Olufsen vinyl turntable LP player. And we used to go to, I was about 7 or 8, I think, and we used to go to the Harrods summer sales, and they had this fantastic record department. We used to go through shelves and shelves of vinyl albums that were on sale, and you could pick up these old and golden gems for 50 pence, this, 12-inch album. And so we used to buy a whole load of sort of cheap knockoffs of soundtracks, sort of theme
ah,
tunes from the 60s and the 70s. And I used to bring it home, and it was like a religious experience putting the album onto the turntable. And I was never allowed to touch it. It was this is diamond tip and so on. I was exposed to the first LP that I ever had was the soundtracks for Ennio Morricone's For a Few Dollars More and
wow.
Fistful of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that just my mind exploded when I heard that.
So,
And
so
yeah,
you were listening to soundtracks before you saw what they were attached to?
yes, just listening to music. We had a John Barry's Greatest Hits from the 60s. So it's listening to all those amazing theme tunes and the Bond scores as well,
Yeah.
the Bond songs and the Persuaders and the Tamarind Seed and the melodies. Melodies captivated me. In terms of musical education, well, at primary school, I was very fortunate to have free music lessons. Gone are those days, sadly.
Yeah.
But I learnt the violin and the piano at school. So I went to a Church of England school, primary school, and I could pick any instrument I wanted to, and I chose the violin and the piano. So I had music lessons, and I had a really strict piano teacher who was quite fearsome, I remember. But I loved it. And I had a few grades, I think I got up to grade
Mm.
5, not particularly high. But at home, I was, being second generation British Asian, I was forced to go to the Hindu temple on a Sunday. And then I went to a Church of England school, so I would sing in school choirs. And I learnt the Indian sitar and tablas growing up at home.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had a very, very strict sitar teacher who gave me incredible discipline. I mean, the sitar is one of the toughest instruments to play really well, and it
Mm.
has steel strings. And at the age of about 10, I was learning to play. My guru, who comes from this long lineage of virtuoso, famous sitar players, was incredibly strict, and I was not allowed to. I could only play scales, even just one note to get the right hand technique, and the positioning is so crucial to, as part of your foundation of playing the sitar well. So I think I only played one scale for the first 3 months of learning to play it.
Wow.
And that was tough on me, actually. After 6 months of just not really progressing to playing a proper tune was really
Mm.
frustrating.
And
Um,
what age were you when you were doing this?
about 10. I was 10
About
years
10.
old.
Wow. Yeah,
But
that's a lot for a 10-year-old, isn't
it's
it?
a lot, yeah. The
Yeah.
sitting straight, and so, and being rapped on the knuckles. So I mean, actually, I've got very very tough memories of learning the sitar.
Yeah.
But as I became a teenager, there was this amazing place called the Bhavan, which is the Institute of Indian Culture in West London, in West Kensington, and that was a great place for the Indian community to congregate and experience concerts and learn how Indian dance and Indian musical
Oh,
instruments and
wow.
singing. So I've always loved rhythm and percussion. And so I learnt the tablas. My mom took myself and my brother to the institute, and she expected me to learn Indian dance. and my brother to learn the tablas, the Indian percussion. And actually, it ended up being the other way round. And I ended up learning percussion, and my brother went into Indian dance. So I loved it. I love rhythm. I love tablas. Because I have a natural affinity for numbers and mathematics, because I ended up doing a degree in maths. Indian classical music is based on the foundation of cross rhythms, and like you have to learn to speak a rhythm before you play it. That's the kind of the Indian notation, Indian classical music notation. So I would speak a rhythm in 7/4 and play something else in 4/4, and to have lots of different time signatures and cross rhythms and double time and half time going on all the time. So that was a really, really nourishing sort of period for me as a teenager. But at school, I was immersed in all styles of music when I got to secondary school. So I wanted to be, at the age of 10, I discovered singing. Well, I was always singing before then,
Yeah.
but I discovered Barbara Streisand
Ah,
and musicals. So my way into
Wonderful.
music was, I loved Stephen Sondheim and Rodgers and Hammerstein and all those classic musicals of the day, The Sound of Music and you name it, Mary Poppins. And
Brilliant.
so I sang in school choirs a lot. There were 3 choirs. There was a gospel choir and a pop choir, and there was a Latin choir. So I learned I loved being a part of that group communal sound that we would create. And then I played the violin in the school orchestra, and then I had my own pop bands at school, and I won this sort of as a school's music competition, which took place at the Royal Festival Hall. I was about 13, 14 years old, and I wrote a song. I was listening to your other podcast.
I was
with
going to say,
Daisy.
this sounds like Daisy at the Albert Hall, doesn't it?
There's a similarity there. It's really bizarre. And so I wrote a song. It was the first song I ever wrote at the age of 13, 14, and it got chosen to be performed as part of a school's thing, a big school's competition thing. And so I had a big band from the school, and my music teacher was there, and head of department. And so I sang in front of a huge audience at the Royal Festival Hall, which was great. And so that really and I used to sing in school assemblies. I went to an all-girls secondary school, and we had about 1,250 girls in the school. So in school assemblies, I used to sing in front of 1,200 girls, singing Barbara Streisand songs.
That's fabulous.
Which was good fun.
So that moment at the Festival Hall, I mean, Daisy mentioned that moment on the Albert Hall stage kind of contributed to her thinking, I could make a career out of this. Did you have a similar feeling?
Well, it was something that was always there. I loved music. I mean, I loved film as well. At school, I ran the film club, and at university, I became the film critic for the student newspaper. Wow. And I never thought that could be a career, that I could make a career out of it. It was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to go about doing it, because I never had any mentors. And also, I was always a bit of a geek, and I loved computers, and I loved technology and science fiction, as my dad was a big sci-fi fan, and I loved theme tunes. I grew up really captivated by Doctor Who and children's TV of the day, Rhubarb and Custard and Grange Hill and Blue
brilliant.
Peter and those theme tunes that my parents had bought, with Ennio Morricone and John Barry and so on. So in terms of career, I was quite academic, and I was also very shy and real introvert. So I ended up doing a degree in mathematics, and then I did a postgrad in music technology. And in terms of me wanted to get into the industry, I loved film a lot, and I loved sound and recording, and I was building up my own little recording studio at home with a Fostex X26 multi-track recorder, and bought my first synthesizer. I was really into Jean-Michel Jarre, and I would play Oxygen, or I would play Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F, or the theme tune for Knight Rider, all on my Casio synth that I had.
Yeah.
So I thought that I wanted to go into music engineering, and I'd buy albums, and I was really interested in what went on behind the albums instead of the performing side.
Mm.
Who are the people that, music engineers, record producers. I'd look at the credits on the sleeve of a vinyl album and look at, what do all these people do? And I then got into buying Sound on Sound magazine and discovering, the world behind the performers. Daniel Lanois was a big hero of mine. So I remember being at university, and I did a postgrad course in music technology, and I learnt about MIDI programming and acoustics and psychoacoustics and music and emotion. And that's what there were very few courses at the time,
Mm.
but that's something that I really wanted to pursue further. So then I met Peter Gabriel, and
What,
he came to
just
the
down the pub?
yeah, he came to the university. I think he was given an honorary doctorate at
Oh,
City
okay.
University, and it was like meeting the Queen.
Yes.
You're standing in line, and I had to do a little show and tell of what I was up to, what I was doing, what project I was writing some MIDI programming. My project that I was doing for my thesis was trying to create MIDI software that would make it easy for people to understand Indian classical cross rhythms, Indian classical
Ah.
tabla rhythms. So I showed him what I was doing and said, "Oh, very interesting, Nainita." We shook hands, and he said, "Well, look me up when you've finished your course." And I
Wow.
thought, "Oh, okay." And of course, how do I get in touch with this guy?
Yeah.
So I didn't. I went off and worked in the film industry as a sound designer, because I had my own portable DAT recorder, and I was out recording sounds all the time. And digital editing, sound editing had just come in with the precursor to Pro Tools. It's a 2-track audio editing software called Sound Tools. And so I ended up working in the film industry as a sound designer, sound editor, and that was fantastic grounding for me in terms of understanding the sonic landscape of sound in film and TV and how everything has its place. It's not just about the music, it's about how sound and sound effects, dialogue, foley's, music all helps and works
Yeah.
cohesively to tell a story through sound. Because, of course, sound is 50% of a film,
Yeah.
and it's not just the images on the screen. And I was very influenced by the Coen brothers and their film Barton Fink, or Walter Murch, who did the sound design and the editing on Apocalypse Now. And those kinds of films were sort of seminal for sound in movies, and the way they push things forward, in terms of groundbreaking technology and
Mm.
creatively how they move things forward. So I did that for a couple of years, and I ended up working on a film for Bernardo Bertolucci, and a Beatles biopic called Backbeat. And
Oh, I love that film.
oh, you can remember it? Wow.
Yeah. That was
Um,
great, that film.
it
About the
was.
Hamburg. The
That's
Hamburg girls.
right. Yeah, the
Yeah.
fifth Beatle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I worked on Hackers, which was an early Angelina Jolie film, and a film for Werner Herzog about Lessons of Darkness, which was one of the first films to be made in 70 mm. And the way he uses music in films is very off the wall and left field. Really interesting filmmaker. So I did that for a while, and I just thought, oh, I was working in Germany actually for Werner Herzog, and I really missed London. So I came back to London without any work and sort of penniless. And I remembered what Peter Gabriel had said, a couple of years before. And so I wrote a letter to Real World Studios. And of course, Real World Studios is one of the best studios in the world. And for me, it would have been a dream. I really wanted to get into music engineering and the music industry. So I heard back from Real World. They invited me to come down and have a meeting. So I met the studio manager, and within 4 hours of, having been given a tour of the studio and having a chat with them, I talked myself into a job as Peter's assistant music engineer. So that was a dream come true for me. And I learned so much working for Peter, working with world's best music engineers and producers and musicians. And so I learned a lot there, not just technically, but I learned a lot about how to work with people and nurture creativity and get the best out of musicians, which lessons that I've still carry with me today when I'm dealing with musicians and handling sessions of my own.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so in terms of the people who've inspired you, just listening to you talk there, I would go back to your parents taking you to the record sales for a start, because that just opened up a whole new world for you, it sounded like. And Peter Gabriel saying, "Look me up when you're done." It sounds like a key person, really, because you ended up going back there and
Yes.
opening your
Yes.
mind to all these things.
Yes. I mean, I'd listened to, there's some sort of seminal albums when I was growing up that meant a lot to me. And I remember listening to his score for The Last Temptation of Christ by Martin Scorsese. And that music, that album was groundbreaking at the time, the way that he integrated world music. And I was very much into world music anyway. And I mean, I've always kept an open mind and loved jazz and pop and world and classical, all of those things growing up. So, yes, I mean, I've never, it's interesting, I've never had any mentors. I've never had, in the traditional sense that people have really embraced in the last few years. And I think that's so important, mentoring and being a mentee and assisting people. That's a real path into the industry these days. I think it's come more from Los Angeles, from America, where it's, I mean, there are many routes climbing the mountain, but that is definitely a way to go for a young composer, emerging composers, and assisting established composers. And that's something that I've never ever had. So I come through the school of hard knocks by writing them, just getting straight in composing music, as opposed to assisting or doing additional music or whatever, orchestrating or anything like that. And so having those opportunities, those few opportunities, getting my first feature film was a massive break for me. And I did that by, there was a really fantastic supervising sound designer, a sound editor called Eddie Joseph. And he gave me a break. I pestered him. I did pester him for about 6 months, though. I'd write a letter once every 2 weeks, and I'd call him up, because this was in the days before emails existed.
Wow.
And I'd call him up and say, "Hi, Eddie, this is what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm working on such and such, and please let me come and visit you." He was working at Twickenham Film Studios, and so I went along for a meeting eventually. I think it took about 5 or 6 months of following this project. He was so sweet and polite. He said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing yet, Nainita, but because it's very early days on the project, and I got right in there, right from the ground roots level, a very early stage. And then eventually I got a meeting. I went to Twickenham Film Studios, had a meeting with him, and he said, "Well, would you like to be an assistant on the job on this film, Little Buddha?" And I would make myself indispensable and say, "I know everything there is to know about this." This film was set in the Himalayas, and so I know everything there is to know about Buddhist chants. And he said, "Okay, well, your job is to translate these and transcribe all these audio recordings that they'd done on location." And there was all on DAT tapes, and I'd have to make notes and keep a logbook of everything. And so that was my way into
making yourself indispensable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I ended up working on that film for about 4 months. And then that then led to another film and to another film and to another film. So
suddenly you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So, Nainita, I am asking guests to the music room to leave an item and a piece of advice for others to find. You mentioned before that you'd had a little trouble trying to find an item amongst many.
Yes.
That's been of use to you. What would you like to leave in the music room?
Okay, so I think I would like to leave an object that is the start, the crux of the heart of what we have to do, which is a microphone.
Ah.
Because everything stems from that. And I think in this day and age, it's very hard to be original and to stand out from the crowd musically. And that's something that people keep saying, as an emerging composer, new to the industry, however young or new or established you are, really, at whatever stage you are, I think we all have sample libraries, and there's a massive leveling field out there now. We all have the same technology. So, what can we do or create that sets us apart from the crowd? And I always look for the imperfections in sounds to give some kind of heart and texture and soul to my music. And of course, samples are incredibly pristine and clean and pure and what's the word? Just soulless, actually. So we can achieve that, I think, by recording our own sounds. And that's how I started. I had one microphone and one DAT recorder, which then progressed onto my computer. And I would just pluck and bang and scrape any instrument I could. And just going out into the world, becoming from sound design roots, I record natural everyday sounds. And then I built up my own unique sound library. And so the microphone is at the heart of that.
I think that's amazing. Very often, you have something in your head, which when you record sounds entirely different. So having that kind of real, tangible thing in front of you,
yes,
to find out what you sound like,
mm-hmm.
I think is really important, isn't it?
Yes, incredibly important. Yeah.
And what advice would you have for anyone trying to do what you do?
There's so many pieces of advice. So picking one thing. I mean, I think it's taken for granted that you can write good quality music, and having musical skills and learning instruments. And I don't have a formal musical education as such. I don't have a degree in music. And there are many very successful composers I know who don't have a degree in music or have a formal education. So that's by the by. But I think what you do need to have is a sense of curiosity, and was one thing, curiosity and being able to develop your own voice. But also, I think this is a lifelong learning craft, composing music. You never stop learning. So you have to remember you've got to grow and evolve. I am not the composer I was 20, 15, 10, 5 years ago. My sound will continue to change depending on the mood of the day or the week or the month or the year. So I think having a musical curiosity and not remaining stagnant in your, and that applies to everything in life as well, not just music. I think that's really important. And another thing, having music is one thing, but social skills, being able to network and meet people, and it's all a part of that curiosity as well. I think being able to communicate well. I've come across, composers that I really respect and admire. And the one thing I've noticed that is common amongst all of them, all those composers, is that they're incredibly good at communicating, whether it's artistically, creatively, on a business level, when it comes to networking or, the social skills. Those successful composers, whether their music is great or whether it's, there are a lot of composers out there who are incredibly successful, no names, okay, but they're incredibly successful, that you listen to their music and you go, okay, it's not that wonderful, but what makes them what they are, and they're really smart and clever at with their social skills and being able to communicate and explain and charm and explain their music and network. So that's something that's really when I've given the odd talk at a university and speak to university students and college students, and it's all about music. That's incredible. Whether it's developing your technology skills or learning to play an instrument, developing your music theory skills, immersing yourself in the world of music. Yes, that's taken for granted. But then there's a whole other side to being a composer, in terms of your rounded skill set to be a working professional composer in the 21st century.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we have microphone going in and a kind of general curiosity, communication skills, and a constant developing of your skill set. Never stop learning. Never stop learning.
Yes, exactly.
That is wonderful. Nainita Desai, composer, thank you so much for joining me in the music room.
Thank you very much, Gareth. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.